There we go. I think.
Yep, there you are. There I am.
Bells ring and the banners fly.
Episode 14, Season 4. The Autopsy episode.
Yes, and just to I guess put this into perspective, we were going to do this yesterday, but going through the 7, 10, whatever steps it is, I thought probably wouldn't have been a good thing because I don't think it was quite in the same place that I am today. And I just wanted actual proof that the sun still does rise in the east and sets in the west. I wanted at least 2 days of that just to make sure that the world wasn't really ending.
Well, the world didn't end.
Canada did.
But Canada did.
And talking pre-production, I think we had said a couple of things that probably were best left unrecorded.
Yes.
But the reality is this is stuff that has gone on. We have no control over it. We tried to have some control over it. I'm sure that you went out and exercised your democratic right to vote. I know I did. I know several people that did. But the reality that we have at this point is not quite as, and again, in my opinion, solely based on my alleged brain and mind, I think that in a year from now, 10 years from now, Canada went through a watershed moment, not quite as drastic as the assassination of John F. Kennedy for us old folks. For our younger folks, not quite as horrific as 9/11. But I will venture to say that there will be a lot of people that will be able to say, I knew exactly where I was on the day before the 28th of April, 2025, and it will be known as the day that Canada died.
Yeah.
Quite simple.
And that's part of the legacy of 10 years of mismanagement, and then having a election that reaffirmed 10 years of mismanagement, and a large portion of this population of Canada was okay with that. That's different, and it has elections have consequences, as they say.
Yeah. Well, everything.
And the consequence of this, sure, but if you were fed the same meal every day for 10 years, and someone came along and said to you, well, would you like to change the menu? And you said, no, I like eating the same thing I've been eating for the last 10 years. That's your right to do that. Yeah. How an entire country decided that was okay, putting aside our personal this views, just think about this. Doing this, okay? This is the crazy part I don't get. There was a country once known as Canada that had a pretty sterling reputation for being progressive in the terms of its society, its technology, its place in the world. It was a place everybody wanted to go to if you weren't an American, perhaps. But it was a country seen full of prosperity, full of potential, and without the sloganeering that went on in the election, this was a place people wanted to come to. And to build their family. So this is not the country that, after 10 years of restructuring and redistributing and re-engineering, we end up with a thing that is not even recognizable. Yeah. Never mind that you and I talk about this over the fence as a place that's unrecognizable. Talk to any foreigner who has a little bit of worldly sense because of their travels or their education or what have you. They're saying, I don't recognize this country. I took time out yesterday in preparation for this our talk today because we, as we said, we didn't do it yesterday. But I went and spent time on social media looking at commentators abroad, not in Canada, but foreigners who have large followers. That after all, social media is really where people come out and say it's the place where people say what they think. But these are folks who aren't Canadians. These are just folks who were observing what happened here on Monday night. And every one of them basically says, how is it possible that in a country like Canada that has apparently an educated population decided that it was more important to destroy the country over a tweet by a guy in the United States who happens to be the president, who trolled the former prime minister, and they decided that is how it's more important to wreck the country just to make sure that they're going to show Donald Trump that his tweets aren't going to go unnoticed.
Well,
and this was kind of the common thread throughout a lot of these commentators. Like, what is wrong with you people? Especially one in particular who went on and said, this is an American. We've been living with Donald Trump for 15 years, who's been putting out tweets and all kinds of sarcastic stuff. And pointed out that, for example, in his first term when in office, he was tweeting backwards and forwards about how he's going to lock up Hillary Clinton. They even had rallies where they were yelling, lock her up. She was never locked up. Nothing ever happened.
Yeah.
This is part of the bamboozling that he does as part of his way of negotiating with people. He throws out, the things that are completely nuts and sees what happens, like throwing spaghetti at the wall, see what sticks. That's his style. And an entire country from coast to coast was bought into this thing. This is the tweet that brought down the country. And you're going, if you look at it from the outside, this is a silly, bloody place that you conned 42% of the population that was voting into, oh my God, I'm going to yell at the sky and I'm going to teach that Donald Trump a lesson. I'm going to totally destroy the country over you.
This is part and parcel of what we've talked about on many of our sessions with the analogy of the magician. Like, how does a magician do his tricks? It's called deflection, and that's exactly what happened here when we had the current prime minister running into problems, runs away from the electioneering, hides away for a couple of days, and brings up the name of President Trump.
Yes.
And that is, just watch over here, because Donald Trump bad, corruption and all this other stuff, forget about it. Donald Trump bad. And you could see that. There were 3 particular times in this last month in the election where things were not going well with Mr. Carney's campaign, dealing with where's your money and what are you going to do about carbon taxes, and every time there was a deflection. Donald Trump's going to take over. He wants to be about Donald Trump, and you're right. I'm sure that President Trump is smart enough to know that he doesn't want Canada as the 51st state, because it's been said before, that's opening up another 40 million people who think like Californians. And I don't mean that bad to anybody from California. I mean, it's just that there's this perception that
why do you want
anywhere along the West Coast, you have different views.
Exactly. But most commentators say, why would you want a guy like Newsom on steroids on your complete northern part of the country?
Yeah.
Now, of course, if we look at the promises made by this chap who's now elected prime minister, he promises to make everything climate centric. In other words, net zero is going to be at the core of everything this country does going forward. All right. If you think that's a seller, okay, just keep drinking that Kool-Aid. All right.
Well, and you're right on that whole thing, Tom. It's maybe the final nail in the coffin.
Oh, it is. Not maybe, Bob. It is
We haven't had 10 years where we've been able to do anything in this country because of the climate policy. And now we're going to teach everybody in the world a lesson that Canada is really, really going to save the world and save the planet, because if you want to deal with Canada, you have to show us a net zero plan on this thing. And well, wasn't it you the other day who said, let's take a look at Spain and Portugal, who have gone substantially into wind power and solar power.
55%
have they managed yet to get their electrical up?
No.
Is there, how many people are still without power?
Even today. That's true. It's a complete catastrophe there in Portugal and Spain, and now they realize, but this is one of the keystone parts of the policy of the new prime minister and his old guard. The same people who gave you 10 years of misery are the people who are standing behind him. What I cannot understand is how totally discredited, scandal-plagued ministers who were disliked intensely by the electorate before Carney showed up and started his Trump tirade have been reelected. It really defies logic. Two of those jokers actually said they're not running and quit, and then suddenly they're back in and got reelected. And I'm thinking, what morons actually live in those ridings? But it's okay. It's part of this. It's Trump derangement syndrome is like herpes. It just keeps coming back. Mm-hmm. And in this country, it's well and truly infected a sizable portion of the population. I mean, some of the videos you see on social media of people yelling at the sky, Canadians, about how, Trump is an evil. I can't use some of the words because, the YouTube censors will throttle or thing. By the way, I want to make a point to anybody who's watching. To watch the whole thing in real time uncensored, you'd have to watch our videos on Rumble instead of YouTube, because we've noticed that the throttling of any political talk by YouTube is very apparent. So if you really want to watch it on a platform that just plays it the way it is, you have to do it on Rumble or listen to it on a podcast, because we're discovering that the censorship that is very much in the interest of the current government of this country. They want to censor all sorts of things. They want to centralize your thinking into a groupthink process. They want to centrally plan everything you do, from buying a house to taking out a loan to deciding what you're going to plant if you're a farmer. It's central planning. That's what the globalist approach is, and they've Canada's voted for that. And so you've got the other half of the population, predominantly in Western Canada and in Western Ontario, I might add, who said, no, thank you, we don't want this. And I think it's just going to be a number of weeks, not a number of months, before this begins to percolate over the top of this.
Yeah, it just falls apart where it ravels. But I think in pre-production, there was a couple of movies about that.
Yeah, exactly.
Look at the beam.
Look at the beam. Yeah, I think that's exactly what happened with Canadians. He only got to half of them. I guess the Men in Black didn't get past Thunder Bay.
I don't know. Yeah, and I guess we're laughing at it, but maybe it's like a train wreck, right? I mean, driving by an accident. Everybody looks, and I guess maybe they're looking and not thinking, geez, that poor individual, that poor family, that whatever it happens to be, it becomes, like you said, a bit of a greed. God, I'm glad that's not me. And
Yeah.
you know, we can laugh at it, but the reality is that this is happening to us.
Yep.
And
And
it's not,
now it's announced that they're not even going to recall Parliament until September. That'll be a year that we've had no functioning Parliament.
yeah.
This is not a serious country. In fact, I've had a couple of people say it's a silly country. For looking in from the outside, Canada is a silly country and
Well,
deserves what it
yeah.
gets. You know, we don't. If a tweet can destroy a country, that's a country not worth saving, frankly. And I don't know how the charade can be kept up. We're dead last in the OECD for GDP, and if you look at CPI, which is a consumer price index, we're in worse shape than the GDP thing. We're really in terrible shape. You know, I pay $7 for a quart of milk or a liter of milk. This is insane. You know, this is what we're doing now. So you know, we're sliding down the economic pole. It's well and truly greased by these globalists who you know have got us set up now.
Well, yeah, and I guess maybe does that mean that we have become the lab? Are we a petri dish? Are they looking at what they can do globally from what they've done in Canada? Um,
No, I don't think so. I think this is a homegrown disease.
well, I
And
wonder. Like you said, we had one minister who quit because he saw the
two,
writing on the wall. Well, two, one in particular.
well, what
Who,
we love particularly, name unmentioned,
yes, you know, but the fact they're from the Maritime should give people a hint.
and who screwed
The
up housing and immigration.
Yeah, and there's a guy that saw the writing on the wall, and rather than jump on the ship to try and steer it in a different direction, he got off like a rat.
Yep.
What got to him? Who got to him? How did he manage to suddenly realize the epiphany of, my God, I can run again and win? You know, a couple of individuals who, it didn't matter what portfolio they were in, went from mediocre at best to trying to rearrange the deck chairs on the Titanic to we're at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean now. I mean, it's
Well, history will record the demise of a country over a social media tweet. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. Because
well, that's right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It
okay,
is.
and so you know that's really what it comes down. We can get deep into the weeds about you know who said what when and when did the decline of the popularity of the conservatives you know merge with the rise of the popularity of the liberal Carney-led bunch. You can paste Donald Trump's face right where those two lines intersect, and that's what it is. They knew that that was a thing that triggered Canadians coast to coast through the CBC, through the paid off media, you know, and so it's a brilliant look. Let's say what it is. It was well done. Okay,
It was well
they
orchestrated,
yeah, they
absolutely.
figured out who was going to be sold this sack of nonsense, and they sold it, and they sold just enough of it to get them, you know, totally in a situation. Now, how you run a country whose power base is located in only three spots is not a very good way to run a country this big. Okay, this is a big country geographically, but a little country in terms of its population and its
Yeah,
real impact on the
yeah,
world. We're kind of tiny when it comes to the big players, even though the current prime minister has pointed out that if Donald Trump and the Americans don't want to lead, he will, and Canada will lead the world. Well, okay, fine. You know, all this bravado is silly, but this
right.
little mouse that's roaring in the corner is you know silly. It's just, and this is not to say people say, "Oh, you guys are anti-Canadian. You shouldn't even be on you're talking about this. You're just disgraceful." No, you know the reality here is that we gave away the place. Okay, all
And
of
we're in
us
the process of
collectively
still
for
giving it
10
away.
years sat on our duffs and didn't speak up because we're nice Canadian. Our niceness got us where we are today. I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. That's the word we use all the time in Canada. I'm sorry. I bumped into you. I'm sorry. I'm walking in front of you. I'm sorry. this is the I'm sorry country is now a sorry country.
Well, they don't know it yet, but yeah. And you're right. I mean, we've hit a point in our history where we started a downward slide, and it's going to be nigh well impossible to stop that downward slide. The 28th of April is where we reached the apex. And you're right, within a couple of, you're right, months, weeks, days, Alberta has already started to redefine their sovereignty legislation.
I think
I think the province of Saskatchewan is not going to be too far behind.
No, they're bottling up as best they can through the media. I think the anger and the disappointment that half the population feels that they've been robbed of their. And it's not about being a sore loser. This is about a completely irrational change in direction for something that is so bizarre. It's based on a tweet by a president who does it to his own people. It's a joke half the time. And this country bought this hook, line, and sinker and sold by a guy who 3 months ago no one ever heard of. Okay, I mean, you think about the whole setup from start to end. Is right out of it's a bad novel.
Well, bad novel, but was a good movie. The Manchurian Candidate.
Yeah, well, this guy is a man. Now, and we agreed in post-production we'd limit our. Let's not talk about what's happened has happened. There's nothing we can do about it. But what are the consequences going forward? And I think that's that a lot of that is a bit of an alchemy of what you think with your head or your heart. But the bottom line here is that the formula is identical to what the formula was before the 28th of April. And that's what in fact, part of that formula is now on steroids, meaning the net zero nonsense, the DEI, ESG nonsense, the whole business of we're going to make America our enemy, and we're going to make European Union and Asia. I mean, we don't pick what country, but I suspect it would be China, because who are you going to talk to in Asia? And that's going to be they're going to be our new pals. And by the way, we're going to go down to Washington and we're going to straighten out Orange Man. And I'm thinking, okay, I don't know what Polymarket is going to do with its betting formula on how this will turn out. But I'd start putting some money on the big player, because this won't end well. I don't know how they will deal with the fallout of the, first of all, the rhetoric that Carney, the prime minister, officially put out on his acceptance speech about America. Our relationship is over. You got a guy in the White House who's pretty nationalistic, okay, and has a thin skin. And in fact, even said he would prefer to deal with Carney than that other guy who he didn't like during the election. But now the guy that he kind of likes better, has basically called him all sorts of names. And and
it didn't work well for his predecessor, Mr.
Yeah, blackface didn't do well with that. Okay, so I don't know how the bankster is going to do with the
president. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't even use the name specifically, but there's a whole administration there that has it out for Canada. People seem to don't understand in this era that while Trump is the main sort of focus here, he's surrounded by equally, if not more, aggressive folks when it comes to trade and geopolitics. That team, is dealing with some very, very tough issues, way beyond whether you can sell cheese in Canada or whether a Ford made in Oakville can be sold in the U.S. These people are dealing with 2 wars. They're dealing with a whole set of trade issues at the coal face with China, with the EU, from a position of strength in many ways. Because let's face it, the Chinese need America more than America needs the Chinese when it comes to all those boats full of cheap junk to be sold at Walmart.
Yeah.
So if someone is dumb enough to believe that the pipsqueak from Ottawa is going to start giving lessons to this crowd, this is stupid. We need to be partners, not protagonists in this thing, because this is really it's dumb.
And at that point, I'd really like to say to our American listeners, not all Canadians are bad. Not all of us have drunk Kool-Aid that says that America bad, not our friend. And let's go back to the simple statements of, you're right, we may not be relatives, we may not even be friends, but we are neighbors, and we have to deal with that. Our trade balance, Prime Minister Carney aside, our trade is north-south. It is not east-west. It's going to take 2 decades or 3 decades to change that. And if we start throwing net zero into the whole thing, I can tell you right now that that new LNG gas plant in Kitimat, you may as well just fold up your tent and go home, because we can't send that, because that's not ever going to meet net zero. It's impossible.
Well, and I'll give you another, reason how this phony business that came up during the election is still being bandied about by Doug Ford in Ontario, who's totally discredited in my eyes, but it's neither here nor there. Yeah. They're saying, well, there'll be no tariffs, no free trade, free flow of ideas and goods from coast to coast in Canada. Well, here's a news flash for you. Pick any one of the provincial associations that represent a trade or a profession, be that the lawyers or the doctors or the plumbers or whoever. These are locally based fiefdoms. If you think the College of Physicians and Surgeons of any damn province will suddenly say, well, we're just gonna pack up our tents and go home and let any doctor come and practice in my province who Ottawa has deemed okay, is dreaming in color. You think the bar associations of all these provinces are suddenly going to pack up their tents and say, oh no, anybody who wants to practice law can just come in here because Carney says we're going to have just one country coast to coast with just one set of rules? That's not going to happen. You think the plumbers union in Halifax, who wildly went to vote for these guys in Ottawa, is going to let plumbers just show up from anywhere and start working without any paper? Come on.
The engineers are another group.
The list is quite lengthy. All right. This is the dumbest thing. All the motor vehicle shops are going to close up shop coast to just have one license plate for Canada.
You're throwing out the gauntlet to see how stupid people can be, and we already have proven that they're going to rise to the challenge. Come on.
The Orange Man bad. We have one license plate coast to coast. I mean, come on. We're getting silly here too, but
well, you laugh because if we didn't, we'd be crying, and I guess that's part of it. I don't know the whole issue when you sit back and you think you're right. We sold a bill of goods to people that the United States is not our friend, and I'm thinking, like, my God, how shallow are you? Not to sound crude about this, but how did you ever manage to find your way out of the birth canal?
Here's how I put it. If I have to choose between some rube from China versus some rube from Alabama or some rube from Nigeria, I'm going to pick the rube from Alabama, because I have more in common with that guy than I do with the other two. That's just normal
Yeah.
because we happen to be on the same continent and we share many more. I don't share very much with the rube from China. I share very little with the rube from Nigeria. Well, it's
Mhm.
all nice that we can talk to the other two and try to work things out. But those two aren't going to come and save my behind because the rube in Alabama knows more about me than he knows about the rube in Nigeria or the rube
Yeah.
in China. Okay, that's just the way it is. And this heretical, it's heresy really that's being sold by the globalist carney about how I should start trusting some guy in Frankfurt over some guy in Chicago. Are you kidding me? It's not going to work. Okay, they don't care. All right,
Yeah.
or some guy in Kuala Lumpur is going to be more important to Canada's well-being than some guy in L.A. You know, this is not realistic.
And you brought up the point too of President Trump being in Michigan and reactivating a base because he doesn't think that
Yes.
we in Canada and you know I'm sorry Canada, uh, he's right. Here we are in the midst of U.S. not our friend, U.S. bad. We're not going to take your F-22, F-35, 90, whatever it happens to be. We're going to go and look at somebody maybe in Europe. Well, these planes, yeah, they fly and they use jet fuel, but that's about where the similarity ends. What I don't understand is why we as Canadians are not supporting our military. You know, we now are going to go through, we're going to have to cancel a contract for the F-35s. That's going to cost us millions, hundreds of millions, maybe even billions of dollars.
They don't care.
And they don't care.
No,
To go
there's
to
nothing
open up
there's nothing to
another.
understand. They don't care.
Well,
This is,
and that's
when you're in a political cult, because that's what the Liberal Party is emerging into. It's a political cult that gets triggered by crazy things like a tweet. Okay, only a cult can do that. I mean, George, the Johns. I mean, this is like one big Jonestown, who's decided that we're gonna we're gonna buy into this because Orange Man told us this is bad, and we're just gonna commit suicide. That's what they did in Georgetown, in Guyana. This is a cult. I can't think of any. When I see some of the people yelling and screaming behind, yeah, you can't see that on the podcast, but I know the elbows up nonsense. You go, what has happened to these people? All right, now I think there's going to be buyer's remorse quicker than you can imagine, because
we can
it's
hope.
very clear that these guys are sitting around right now figuring out how do we make up for all the money that has to be generated, not just through borrowing money, which we can't afford to, but okay, this business of, well, maybe we should capital gains on your primary residence you've selling. These boomers will lose their cotton picking, finger licking, chicken plucking minds when they find out that, holy mackerel, I'm going to sell my $1 million home, which I thought was going to be, my nest egg, but 300,000 of that is going to go to, the blanker.
That's right. And they realized now, and this has been documented over the last year in particular that I know, that in Canada there is what is $4.7 trillion sitting in homes.
Yes.
That it currently is not being taxed. Not
yeah.
And
yep.
You're right. I mean, that is the logical consequence here. And I just hope that the people who have been sipping away on the Jonestown Kool-Aid think and get to a point where they realize they better spit this out, or it's really going to hurt them. And the fact that a simple tweet can get people
crazy.
Yes. I don't have much hope. They'll be, next thing you know, it'll be President Trump's fault that they're taxing my house this way.
Oh, absolutely.
And
The other
I
thing
don't
we
know.
don't
I don't
seem
know.
to grasp is anybody, for a guy who supposedly is a genius, an economist genius, and who moved Brookfield, his own company, to the U.S. for obvious reasons. Okay, because
And
he knows that money
offshore
will flee
accounts.
this country. Money will start to leave this country in droves. Anybody who's got any chance of keeping their dough in Canada doing nothing is going to take that money and move it. Okay. And then they will move themselves. When I hear the rubbish coming out of the heads of some of these people, but we're going to attract all the medical people who went to the States to come back. I'm going, are you out of your mind? Why would they do that? Okay.
Yeah.
Why would you want to come back and work for peanuts by comparison in Canada, be told what to do, when to do it, how to do it, why to do it in the medical profession?
Yeah.
They're not going to come back here. We had this conversation before, but they'll be crossing the border to work in Ontario hospitals. No, they won't. Nobody does that. Again, the Kool-Aid is just being cooked
Yeah.
or mixed up every day with this. We heard so much utter rubbish, but the one thing that we didn't hear, and that we are not hearing today, post-election, is what are you going to do about the cost of groceries? What are you going to do about people on the streets who are dying from drug overdose? What are you going to do about the people who can't find jobs? What are you going to do about the people whose families are destroyed by violence on the street? And none of these things the people don't matter. It's the cult that matters. It's the groupthink that matters. It's the Pollyanna stuff that's dreamt up in Davos that matters. And oh, by the way, how do we screw you out of every possible dollar we can in taxes?
Yeah.
Okay. And oh, by the way, don't you fly on an airplane, but we will, because we got to go coast to coast on our business jets, spending the taxpayers' money to educate them of how much good we're doing for you. Oh, by the way, you can't buy a car unless we tell you what car you're going to buy in 5 years.
You can't have a car as long as it's electric by 2050.
Yeah. I mean, these people are completely, and that's looking forward. And you want that? We'll talk about that in future episodes, but I don't want that. I don't want to be told when to buy it. I don't want to be told what to eat. I don't want to be told what color my bedroom should be, or I don't want to be told that there's 17 genders. I don't want to be told that the idiot who didn't pass his exams for being whatever is going to be doing what he didn't pass to do because he meets some box that's being checked off. Okay, this whole DEI, ESG, transgender nonsense is now if that's what you want and you bought into it, then face the consequences, because there'll be some parts of this country that are going to say, adios, we're out of here. Okay, and I think basically everything west of Thunder Bay is done.
Well, again, yeah, you're right, because again, going back to the election day, we once again had the big carrot dangled in front of us here on the West Coast or left coast, depending on how you view us politically, that our votes were going to matter.
Listen, you were still voting. You were still voting
right.
in Vancouver, and they already said that it was a minority government for the Liberals.
Yeah.
You haven't even gone to the polls yet. You already been told, don't worry, it's all done. Forget it. Bye. Adios.
Yeah. And we have been told in as many elections as I can remember, going back probably when I first started, that, you people on the west side of the country have a defining say in the shaping of the country and of the government. And I'm thinking, again, I guess it's part of the cult, part of the Kool-Aid drinking. You believe that stuff. Well, if it gets you out to vote, I guess that's good. But the other side of that is well, why don't we just wait so that they can tell us that the election's already won because the polling stations in Ontario will close. So why should he even bother go to vote? No.
Well, this rush to a globalist socialist paradise here is quite amazing, because in 10 years they dismantled this country from the get-go. And I don't know what you're going to do with all the people that you've wrecked along the way who are still here. Like, what are you going to do post-election with those two cops who listed all the crimes that supposedly needed to have some airing of the various characters in the government who did shady things, all those scandals that were swept under the carpet? What's going to happen to those people? What's going to happen to all those police associations, for example, that endorsed the conservatives because they know the crime is out of control in this country? What are they going to do going forward? Are they going to get ostracized because they said this bunch of pirates who don't give a rat's behind about what happens on the streets, it seems? What are they going to do? Are they going to sit around on their duffs and say, well, okay, we'll have to wait another 4 or 5 years before we can, do something about it? I don't think we have the luxury of time here.
That nail was hit right on the head.
Oh, yes.
It's going to come this year or within the next 12 months when the organization called the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and their union are going to have to go before the federal government to negotiate their wage package. And you can bet almost dollars to donuts that part of the negotiation is going to be you had one of your members that shouldn't have been speaking the way they spoke, and you better do something about that. And what you do with that particular individual is going to tell you where you're going to get your money or you're not going to get your money. Now, like all federal governments that are called essential services, they won't be able to go on strike. So, I mean, you and I have gone through that many times, or we went on strike and everything went along swimmingly because the government used their calculator to say, if they go on strike and it's 3.6 weeks, we can give them a 1% wage increase and we're still going to come out ahead. And that's really all it boils down to. Go ahead, go on strike. Big deal. Except you people that are essential, you can't go on strike. So just continue and hope for the best. And that's really what's going to happen with these police. Like, how much funding comes from the federal government to the local provinces, the local cities for law enforcement? You think crime is bad now? Well, we had a friend whose grandchildren have graduated this past year, and the friend said on one occasion, "This is the first time I can actually think in all the grandkids graduations I've gone to, nobody in the graduating class was talking about first responders. I don't want to be a policeman. I don't want to be a fireman. I don't want to be an ambulance driver. I don't want." And I'm thinking, there's a problem right there. If you don't get the people, the ones that want to run towards gunfire or run towards collapsing buildings, everybody wants to stand around now with their cell phones and take pictures and videos for their 15 minutes of fame, and that is not going to bode well.
Well, there's other things that aren't going to bode well when talking economics. Just came across on my handy dandy cell phone here, Deloitte, which is a accounting
firm,
right, projects that Canada will enter into a recession and unemployment will rise above 7%. Question is, why are the federal government's granting new foreign worker visas? And Desjardins, which is another group, right, talks about the unemployment rate would hit above 7%, and they're expecting a loss of 75,000 jobs over the next couple of quarters. That's within 6 months. And employment-sensitive, export-sensitive industries such as manufacturing, steel, and aluminum will be at most risk. There will be other job losses as well, particularly in the service sectors. So, look, these are people whose money's on the table. They have skin in the game. And, this is what we're heading towards.
I know, but, Tom, it's the cult, and all they're going to have to say is Donald Trump wants to make it the 50th state. And the fact that we're losing 75,000 jobs is because of that, or because of this, or because. And I'm sorry that this is the level of voters. That great statesman from many years ago where he said, my goodness, we've allowed the unwashed masses to vote. Must have been in a time machine and seen what Canada looks like in the year 2025.
Well, look, 20 million people approximately voted in the last election. That's half the population, right? Pretty well, minus the 4 million that shouldn't be here. So a little. They voted for higher taxes, higher deficits, more inflation, higher cost of living, more poverty, increased censorship, and increased firearm bans and a lot more crime. Now you got to ask the question, why would they do that? Because that's what we've been dealing. This is brutal. This is what we've been doing for 10 years, and we decided we're going to double down on this. Okay, so
well, I'm sorry.
The other one that just came across, like your fly-by news thing.
Right here.
Yeah, I know.
No, here, Tom. Look over here. Look over here.
Apparently, rumor is the Liberal Party is attempting to literally buy new MPs who are elected as NDP to cross the floor so they can have a majority government.
Well, and that.
I wouldn't put it past them. These people are so corrupt,
and
shameless.
We saw that with the one guy who was elected in Quebec, re-elected, I think it was, who said that it really doesn't matter that we've lost official party status. It doesn't really matter that we only have 7 seats. We've stopped the Conservatives from winning.
Yep.
Okay. So you're right. I mean, in the fact that quite magically, the number that the Liberals need for a majority government is 7. And how many NDP people are there? 7. Yeah. There's a lot of things that are just not adding up on this, and I do not blame the President of the United States for feeling concerned, because I don't think that these guys could sell snake oil, but they'll get people to drink Kool-Aid.
Well, like I said, the general consensus from people looking in from the outside who don't have any skin in the game here in Canada, like you and I do, because we live here, have nowhere to escape to, is that this is a silly place, and it deserves what it gets, because this is so stupid on the face of it. We compared it now to drinking the Kool-Aid in Jonestown, whatever, but it's a cult. This whole thing is so cult-like, and it's like the bat signal went out, Trump bad, and everybody. There's all kinds of analogies you can use, but I really the bat signal, instead of a bat, it was a big L with a little maple leaf in the corner, and everyone was scurrying around. Oh, we got to deal with this terrible thing. This Trump thing is. So that's what's happening.
I mean, there was the First World War, right? The assassination of Ferdinand, the shot that was heard around the world. Well, we now have our own mini version of that, is the tweet that wrecked Canada.
Yeah, or the tweet heard around the world. That might even be.
Well, now it's gone around the world, and it's, I can hardly wait for the comedians to get onto this.
But they're onto it already. I mean, it's no question. But the sadness is that going forward, we are faced with some very fundamental decisions that will have to be made. And I, in pre-production, I said I'm quite frankly depressed, disappointed, and I have very little optimism for the future of this country, because the country has left me. Okay, it doesn't. Yeah. The leadership doesn't care about me and per se. It cares about the big picture and how we are seen in the global context. I'm responsible for global warming, so I best not have a gas stove. I best eat some bugs, okay? I'm responsible for poverty, so I best, look at ways of taking the money I've earned out of my pension or selling my house and give it to someone who's not done a damn thing who comes into this country. I'm responsible for all the problems of racial disharmony, because I happen to be an old white guy who says, we're doing some crazy things here, who, by the way, spent most of his career stamping visas in people's passports. So, I'm also depressed and not optimistic for my my kids and my grandkids, because I don't know what they're going to find
Well, that's right.
going forward, because
Right.
they already have told me, at least, you know, hinted that they may hang around if there's no incentive to stay in Canada
No.
and raise a family or work and be rewarded for hard work. What the hell would you stay here for? And for me, that would be, I have nowhere to go. Look, somebody, Dave Rubin said it the other day. He said Canada's like a giant California, and we touched on that earlier. He said, but Canadians have nowhere to escape to, right?
Yeah,
Where are we going to
they
go?
had different
Okay.
different states.
Yeah, I mean, in California, if you'd had, too much of that Newsom nonsense, you packed up your tent and you moved to Texas or you went to Florida. Where the hell do we go? I mean, you're out there in BC. I'm here in Ontario. Okay, but where do I go? At least in the US, you went to at least a warm climate for most of the year.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can find my place in Alberta. Only because Alberta
you probably would be a lot better and able to handle that because you actually have winter in Ontario. Yeah, we on the West Coast
this year
really don't have a winter. So.
Yeah, but I mean, it's the uncertainty of the future, I think, is particularly challenging to deal with because we had a Potemkin village built basically by Trudeau's cults, where everything looked good, but of course it has nothing inside. We talks big about the military, but we have no ships, we have no planes, we have no tanks.
We're having a hard time retaining the people that are currently in the military.
Well, that's exactly. But it's like I say, it's the Potemkin village approach. You make it all look very nice on the outside, but it's just hollow. It's like a set on a stage in Hollywood. It looks like the main street, but just a cardboard facade, that you can walk around.
Yeah.
That's what they've done. Now they're going to give us more of the same with the brilliance of the globalists who are trying to tell half the population that they've convinced, by the way, that they're going to save the planet.
Saint Mark is going to save us from the dragon.
Yeah, well, anyhow, we've talked about this misery now for 52 minutes, and I guess that's the longest show we've ever made. But it's
a couple of things that come out of that, Tom. I want to. You're depressed, and when we were working, we always had the people that we said were the disgruntled. And I considered myself a D person, but I was never really a disgruntled person. I'd been a disappointed person. And I guess that's where I am right now. I am disappointed in the shallowness of the electorate in Canada. I'm disappointed in a government that it's supposed to lead, but expects you to believe every word they say because they are the government. And I am somewhat disappointed that around the world we are seen as a joke, or the butt of a joke, or whatever it happens to be. And I would hope that somewhere along the line that all of those people around the world that see Canada as a joke, started off with the previous prime minister who liked to go around and dress up in different countries, that these people will also see that, like in their own society, if they care to check and look, they have their own versions of Canadians in their city, in their streets, in their states, in their provinces, whatever they happen to be. It's just unfortunate that right now we have become the magnet to that. Like I said, I'm going to be traveling shortly. And I can honestly say, again, speaking from the heart, maybe not from the mind, I think it's going to be about the first time where I'm actually going to be very, very embarrassed to show a Canadian passport. And that's where I'm going to end it. I mean, it's just a big disappointment for me.
Yeah, well, I think we should.
Yeah, before we go and get the blunt razor blades and the warm water, we should. Michigan.
Right. Yeah. You're right. It's thought provoking to the extent that it is quite depressing, and we can hope for the best, but we have to get prepared for the worst, because I think we're going to be for a very, very rough ride.
Yeah. And I guess
on so many levels, because of the dumbest decision. And it's, no disrespect to half the population who drank the
they
Kool-Aid.
voted. I'll give them that. They
Yeah,
voted.
you're allowed to do that. You're allowed to be stupid, but there are consequences to that. Okay,
Mhm.
particularly if there's this cult approach, because this, I said, it's a cult. It's got nothing to do with logic, and so when the cult gets triggered by a tweet, there's something very weird going on here. And this whole thing has been weird for 10 years. And suddenly 10 years of misery was flushed down the political toilet like it didn't exist. And now we have this shiny new thing here that is
Well, I
being.
think, yeah. Point on that one. I'm sorry that Mr. Polia lost the election. I'm sorry that he lost his seat through rather dubious means of slimy, sleazy politics.
Chicanery there for sure.
But the reality, I think things are where they're supposed to be. Really. Mr. Polia would have been reviled. He would have been hated. He would not have been able to give the electorate what he wanted, because he would have found the cupboards bare.
Yeah, like last.
This is what's happened now. This is a consequence. You voted in a government that still knows the cupboard's bare, and is going to have to, within very, very short time, start producing some positive news for these people, because the tweet that ruined and wrecked Canada is going to be replaced soon by other tweets. And it may not be coming from America. It may be coming from Russia. It may be coming from China. It may be coming from our so-called allies in the European Union.
Yes.
Anyway, yeah.
Well, on that cheery note, listen, if you thought this was okay, please hit the bell, and the like, subscribe, tell others about the two old guys from coast to coast talking about issues. If you want to ensure that the whole episode is given to you, make sure to watch it on Rumble. You may find that parts of it are actually there, not on the other platform.
Yeah.
Or you can certainly listen to it on any of the audio platforms that we're on. So with that, we're going to say adios, muchachos. We'll be back next week, and we'll have some probably more meat on the bones to talk about what we do going forward. To our friends in Western Canada, keep the faith.
Yes, we keep our fingers crossed.
Yep.
To our friends in the States, please, 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 don't hate all of us.
Yeah, we're not all as goofy as you might think we are. No, our elbows are not up. I can tell you that for sure.
That's right. But anyhow, until we meet again, as they say. That's coconuts, isn't it?
See you next week.
You bet.